views, brother.
This is the Run Pod Option. I'm Marty.
I'm Kyle.
And I'm Jeff.
And you can follow us on Twitter at RunPodOption or email us runpodoption@gmail.com. Brought to you by the Fifth Quarter Network. We are closing in on the college football season 2020, and so this is the first episode of many for our conference previews. We are going to cover the MAC, the Conference USA, and the Sun Belt today, and to do that, we have Mr. Lewis from Forgotten Five to help us.
Indeed, it is I. Hello, gentlemen. How is all of the peoples?
All peoples are good.
All your verb are belong to me. I'm so sorry.
Nick, your website, The Forgotten Five, if you want to go into detail a little bit about the site, about what made you start the site.
Right. So I've been an underdog guy for a long time. So I'm originally, a long time ago, I was born in State College, Penn State, my backyard. Grew up in Pittsburgh, University of Pittsburgh. But I've never been a diehard Power 5 guy. And after marrying a Southern girl, I moved to Alabama and was not someone who was about to be having to pick a side in the Auburn-Alabama fight. So 2014, I was the original site manager whenever SB Nation launched Underdog Dynasty, which was, them wanting to create a website for all of the group of 5 teams that didn't have a site. So that wound up being the Sun Belt, Conference USA, the American, which had just been born at that time, plus pretending to care about the independents initially. Did that a couple years, got a little tired of getting micromanaged for $100 a month. So I decided to do my own thing, and that's where Forgotten Five came from. So here we are, all of a sudden, 4 years, going into year 5 of Forgotten Five, and still chugging along.
That's awesome. Yeah, y'all's site is one of my favorites for that coverage in general, because it really is tough to find anyone talking about. There's a few Twitter. There's like Southwest Conference Roundup, who does a lot of the Texas smaller schools, which is neat. But there's
a handful of. There's a lot of Twitter accounts that are sort of sub niches within the group of 5, and then website wise, you have us who do really any and everything in the group of 5, and then Underdog Dynasty and SB Nation it's kind of fractured. There's a bunch of UTEP has its own blog for a reason no one knows, and Buffalo has their own, and NIU used to have their own, but it's there's not really one kind of cohesive voice, so it's nice to pretend that we're that, even though we probably aren't. But yeah, we're there.
Well, I appreciate your existence, at least. There's one.
Finally, someone who appreciates my existence.
NIU, I mean, the interest really went away after they lost Garrett Wool. The wonderful Garrett Wool.
And
I
Jordan
figured
Lynch.
It was whenever Dave Duran cheated on them with a different wolf.
So we will jump into these conferences, kind of laying out how we're going to be doing things. We are going to talk conference by conference by conference. We're going to assume that the 2020 season has nothing standing in its way from being complete. So we're trying to take your mind off things here. And we're going to talk about some new staff highlights. We're going to talk about maybe some coaching expectations, players to watch, and some games to keep an eye out for. And at the end of every conference, we'll pick a winner, East, West, and then the eventual champion. So let's start with the MAC.
Well, first of all, I mean, we're not going to talk about coronavirus, but we are going to have you sign a waiver, making sure that we're not liable if you do come down with COVID.
Look, my day job is in healthcare, so odds are good I'm already swimming in it, so y'all are good.
He volunteers every day, Kyle. Way to bring that up.
And I'm already insert body part deep in disease, so we're good.
So the MAC, going straight into the coaching discussion, no new head coaches, which, but when you do the research for head coaches, you think maybe at least one has jumped ship. Do we think that, as a whole, the MAC, coach-wise, is healthy right now? Do you think that's a good thing for the MAC that they haven't got anyone poached away, or is it bad because no one wants them?
I would say that more or less it tends to be a good thing. But for all its ups and downs, the one thing that you can always rely on the MAC for is stability relative to everybody else, which, just like anything else, it has its pros and cons. the list of schools outside the MAC where you can go 0-12 and not be on the hot seat at all is not very long. Now, Akron, very young team, still building, still developing. So not a shock that they go 0-12, but even Kansas, if it wasn't Les Miles, would be in hot water if they went 0-12 in a year. Flip side of that, you can have a good season, an 8 or 9 win season, and not immediately be fearing for your coaching life that your guy's going to get poached away by another program. And it's good because you have a situation like Kent State, which is my favorite school right now in the MAC, where you had a season that was kind of on the brink of but because you had a coach who knew he had a long leash, he was able to start taking chances and right that ship, where other coaches probably would have coached differently and just coached not to lose, and things may have never turned around. So that sort of stability and leeway, I think in the MAC's case, is a good thing because it sort of jives with how the rest of the conference tends to run.
Especially with how Bowling Green seemed to be just a revolving door for a while. I am happy to see that coaches are staying a little bit longer, and that someone like Mike New at Ball State is able to prove himself. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to have 4 or 5 years, and if I'm a coach that knows maybe my system is a little bit harder to implement, or I'm younger and I want to be able to learn and grow with the actual school, the MAC seems like a really great opportunity to do that for the reasons you laid out.
And I think it's a situation where, there are a lot of schools out there, especially your, let's say those in the group of 5 that perceive themselves to be more upwardly mobile than they actually are, that because of that, have this sort of kibosh on wanting to be a stepping stone program. They're unwilling to hire a guy who's, trying to move up in the world. But, there are a lot of benefits to be had from a guy who wants to do a good enough job that he gets snatched away by somebody else. And for a conference like the MAC, it doesn't happen a ton. We were a little bit surprised whenever Turner Gill left Buffalo to go to Kansas, but stuff like that can happen. But it's nice to sort of have that opportunity and to have, MAC programs are not really sort of above that. It doesn't happen all that often. It's not because schools prevent it from happening. And they're sort of able to reap the rewards of that, a la, oh God, what's his face? The dude that went to Iowa State. I don't even care what his name is anymore.
Matt Campbell?
Yes, Matt Campbell. Sorry, I had forgotten about him. He's so irrelevant to me. My bad. I can't Big 12. Oh, sorry, it's just not in my DNA.
That's okay. I'm awful with names too. Jeff and Kyle, are there any coaches in particular that you're going to be keeping an eye on maybe for this upcoming season, or that you think this upcoming season really need to either keep the ship running smoothly or needs to completely turn this bad boy around?
I'm a big fan of Tim Lester. I kind of really like Western Michigan. So, I mean, they were kind of right there. I don't think that they're like in a position where they need to right the ship necessarily, but it's always, just trying to stay right up at the top, trying to continually making yourself relevant. They tend to have a fun offense. So I'm just excited to see what they can do. I think that they're going to end up taking the West.
I think Lester he would have been a great hire if he hadn't followed PJ Fleck, because I think that a lot of times you'll talk about coaches, they're either rebuild hires, guys who need to start over, or continuation hires, guys who are sort of sticking with what worked. And I think that the large amount of success that Fleck had gave them a bit of a false sense of just how much of a continuation hire he was. And I'm a little bit worried that he's going to be able to sustain enough, given how relatively little of his production he has coming back, if they're going to be able to sustain enough to take the West. I'm not to suggest that, them not taking the West means a 5 or 4 win season and he's out. But I don't think that Lester's ceiling is above 8 or 9 wins. And I'm wondering how okay Western Michigan and their fans and their admin are with that, given the precedent that PJ Fleck set.
And that PJ Fleck's players are, after this season, I think effectively done. Anyone that he had brought in will be graduated. Yeah,
I believe so. This is the last season of any. If there's any play left, they're done after this year.
Yeah, one guy that I'm kind of intrigued by, and I think I want to say he was kind of a hot candidate a few years ago, is Jason Candle from Toledo. Just looking over his record earlier, he had gone 9-4 and 11-3 back-to-back years, and then it seems like maybe Toledo's kind of plateaued a bit. They've won 7 in 6 games, so I don't think he's on the hot seat by any means, but I'm really just intrigued to see if they can get closer to where they were, 3 years ago versus the last couple of years.
Really intrigued by this young whippersnapper, Frank Solich.
I have to share this with you guys. This is one of my favorite moments in recent history. I was over the summer. We put out like a list of like games to rewatch that were available in full on YouTube, and one of my favorite G5 ones was Hawaii beating Alabama back in I think 2003. But the reason I recommended the game was not just because Hawaii beat Alabama, but because out of all 50 games that we posted, that game had my favorite moment in it, which is that when they came back from the commercial break to start the fourth quarter, the first play was a missed field goal by Alabama, and the very next thing was a game break cut in to announce the firing of Frank Solich from Nebraska, which I thought was just a wonderful memory of how grateful Ohio U is for Nebraska.
It really is insane how long he's been there. And doubling back, Jeff, on Jason Candle, if he can turn the defense around, and he brought in a guy from Mount Union named Vince Carries, it's supposed to be just an ace with linebackers in that front seven and coaching. I'm interested to see how Toledo turns that around. Their defense, they gave up 20 yards or more on gains almost 7 times each game last year, which is insane.
Those are big chunk plays.
That's a lot of chunk plays every game.
You kidding me? This is the MAC. Akron does that quarter.
Akron is giving that up to UMass. So if we're done with coaches, we can shift on to player spotlights. I am going to start. It's going to be Miami of Ohio, and I'm going to point out running backs Jalen Bester and Tyre Shelton, who are really going to help Brett Gabbert along, and I think they're going to be pivotal to making sure that offense keeps rolling, because Miami of Ohio really isn't a fast-paced offense like we see in college football nowadays, right? It is a little bit slower. I think that's not a bad thing, especially in the MAC, but with Bester and Shelton, I think they're going to be critical to the Red Hawks' success.
I'm going to throw out Jarrett Patterson from Buffalo.
Yes. I strongly agree with that one.
I mean, incredibly effective. I mean, there's a stat, 34% of his total carries resulted in a first down or a touchdown last year.
That's incredible.
Yeah. I mean, the offense is going to go through him.
Yeah, he's always been an interesting guy. Sorry to jump in there, but he's a very interesting one because he's got great top end speed. He's one of those guys that once he gets into open field is doing great, but he needs a little more help than your average guy getting to that open space. So if his line does a great job, he's set, but if not, he struggles a little to create for himself. So he's not replacing an entirely new offensive line, but it's like just enough instability turnover that you're going to be curious to see if he can sustain it. So I really agree that that's a good one to keep an eye on.
I'll switch it up. I originally was going to talk about the 2 Buffalo running backs because I think we had kind of touched on them before, both running for over 1,000 yards. But Buffalo also
on our bowl previews.
Yeah, Buffalo is also returning the top 2 sack registerers, Malcolm Kuntz and Taylor Riggins. It looks like last year they had 17.5 sacks combined, and they'll both be back. That's
That's production.
Strike fear into Frank Solich's old pants.
I like to imagine he's been wearing the same pair of Dockers since 1993.
Since 2003, since he got fired. Probably.
He's been wearing the same Dockers.
Yes, there is lucky.
I want to see that now. I want to see you guys go to a Buffalo, Ohio game and just hold sign that says, "What's up, old pants?"
That would involve me having to go to Buffalo, probably.
And Ohio, honestly.
Oh.
It builds character.
No, I'm from upstate New York. I don't need that character.
He's been drowned in that character most of his life.
Here's one that most folks probably aren't talking about and should be. So we know that with Nathan Rourke leaving Ohio, you go from a very, very well-oiled machine of an Lord knows what at quarterback. But one that I'm curious about is we forget so easily that his younger brother, Curtis Rourke, is a redshirt freshman on the roster. It's not for sure yet that he's going to redshirt this season, and obviously he was supposedly going to prove in spring ball and beyond whether or not could be the guy, but there's not enough established production on the depth chart for him to definitely not be the guy. So I would definitely be curious because supposedly he is very similar to his brother, but even a little bit bigger and a little bit better arm. So not immobile, but more of a traditional pocket style passer. So I would be curious to see if he can be the guy and kind of carry that forward, or if they're going to have to rely on some other inexperienced Randa.
I think it's going to be invaluable too, because I believe Nathan was there for 5 years with his red
At
shirt.
least.
So yeah, at least it felt like it was there forever. So having that,
He came in with Solich.
that's who Solich brought in as his franchise quarterback. Yeah, having that feels invaluable too, and maybe makes the difference for those spring practices that maybe you didn't get when his knowledge of that system, Nathan's, he'd be able to essentially just put his younger brother through school while they're quarantined up.
He's got his old playbook out, and he's just got a bunch of written hand notes in there.
I have a quarterback as well for Ball State, Mr. Drew Plitt. Ball State's intriguing to me because they return a pretty good amount of production. I think they're going to be a good team, but everyone from Athlon to ESPN doesn't think that they're going to finish above third in their division. And I don't know what to think about that because they really have, between him, their running back, Caleb Huntley, I feel like they're going to be one of the best offenses this year in the MAC.
Well, and that's one of the challenges with being a Ball State supporter is that for at least the duration of Mike New's tenure, if not further back. So early on, it was, man, Mike New keeps getting bit by the injury bug. But we're now multiple years into it, and it's kind of like okay, do they need to rethink their strength and conditioning program? Because he's got, I can't remember, I want to say it was the 2017 season. This was a team that went 2 wins. It was largely because, 2 games into the season, they lost their starting quarterback. And the next week they lost their starting running back. And a few weeks later, they were on their 4th or 5th quarterback. And I think Drew Plitt in his freshman year was part of that fracas. For several seasons now, they have been a team that has shown amazing flashes of potential whenever everyone's on the field and everyone's healthy, but have been completely incapable of sustaining that for long enough to really matter in the MAC. So this will be yet another season where they are one of the better, at least top half, if not best teams in the conference on paper, but it is a complete toss-up as to whether or not they'll hit any of that potential at all.
I think it's interesting, too, because, there's a guy in Iowa that is available for strength and conditioning coach now.
His fall has really freed up.
Yeah, he just got paid $1 million, so he's good. He'll work for cheap.
God, that's awful.
And if
any other player?
Air conditioning, you might be able to get a guy named Mike Gundy fairly soon.
That's true. Yeah, that's.
I'm sorry. No. Mullets are not allowed in Muncie.
I highly doubt that.
Yeah, we're recording this on June 15th for anyone who maybe listens.
Today's been a big day.
Year. It's been a big day for Mike Gundy. Central Michigan, you talked about Buffalo's defensive line and what they're returning. Central Michigan returns Laquan Johnson and Robbie Stewart, who are going to anchor a pretty experienced Central Michigan defense coming back. They combined for 22.5 tackles for loss, 9 sacks, 30 run stuffs. So I think they're going to be pretty pivotal to Central Michigan's defense and how they're going to progress and just how Jim McElwain's going to do in his second season.
Yeah, I'm really positive on Central Michigan, more so than Western, just because, again, of stability, turnover, that sort of thing. I think that Central Michigan will be in even slightly better position than Buffalo defensively because, not only do they have their 2 best havoc makers, if you will, coming back, but they have a lot more of both their starters and their depth coming back from last season, so they have to worry a lot less about who's going to do what job, fill in what role, that kind of thing. They can just worry about, Sorry, Eastern Michigan, adding another brick to the wall. So it'll be a little more stable for them. They would probably be my pick early on to lead just because of the amount of stability and the amount of 6 from last year. And I'd be hard-pressed to bet against Jim McElwain compared to the rest of the coaches in the division.
Yeah, and for comparison, returning production, Central Michigan is 24th in the country, returning 73% of their both offense and defensive production. Western Michigan is returning 46%, which ranks 119th. So that plays by the numbers too, and that's a lot of work for Western Michigan to overcome.
Lester's bringing in his guys.
He's looking at the bullpen, tapping his arm. Let's go to key games. I am going to start with a game on Wednesday, November 18th, because who doesn't love Wednesday football? Buffalo at Ohio, in my opinion.
The game that we're going to.
The game that we're visiting. Will likely got a Wednesday trip.
Oh. You said it was November too?
It's November 18th.
Oh God.
Just sleet. It's gonna be gross.
Oh.
I think the winner of this game is likely gonna be your Eastern champion. Or your East champion. So I've got it circled pretty big. It's almost a shame that it's on Wednesday. It's almost poetry that it is also Wednesday.
That's why it's on Wednesday, though, because weeknight action, right? You got to stick with tradition. Biggest names on the biggest nights? Question mark.
Yeah, I feel like weeknight action has gotten overshadowed recently by Pac-12 After Dark, and it's a shame, just in terms of a marketing standpoint.
Marty, you still recovering from that game?
Yeah, I'm still dead from Washington State, UCLA.
Therein lies the Max flaw. If they would just lean a little harder into sucking like the Pac-12 and the Mountain West do with the bottom of the league, they could easily have the same kind of after dark action.
It'd be a whole new world.
Oh, no. Wait, sorry, my bad.
No, please continue.
That was honestly better than a note I could hit, and I think I'll speak for Jeff. Kyle's a singer, so Kyle can do it. Kyle, Jeff, or Nick, what are some games that stick out to you this year? In conference and out, by the way. I don't want to put a limiter on this.
I'm going to go with a slightly different weeknight action. Really, any game you pick in November is going to be weeknight action. I'm going to go later in the year, but earlier in the week. Tuesday, November 24th, is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving. Central Michigan at Kent State.
Oh.
I think that there's a good chance that once again this year, Kent State winning that last game would be an upset, and them doing so might be the decider of whether or not they go to a bowl again. I'm a big fan of Kent State. I really like what they've done with the program, the momentum they've made. They've got a number of guys coming back, and they're far away from being like elite. Oh my God, we might contend for the division, let alone the title. But I think if the second half of the season progress they made last year continues, they're a team that is now a steady bowl threat, not a division threat in the near future. And so I think that they're a team that are going to flirt with it again. They probably won't need as big of a comeback to get there at this point, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe their game on the road at Miami the week before that, but definitely the week after that, the season finale at home against Central Michigan, punching a bowl in front of their home crowd would be a good one to watch.
So a quick sidebar then about Sean Lewis and Kent State. They won 2 games his first year. They won 7 games last year. Do you think 7 and anything better than that is to be expected, or is Sean Lewis safe if they take a step back?
I think that due to the fact that 7-6 was a complete shock to everybody but him last year, I think that a step back is okay. When we start talking about how big a step back, like if you look at Kent State, you have a team that finished 7-6. But was 3-6, and they got to that point in part by finishing the regular season 3-0 in one-possession games. As we all know, one-possession games tend to regress to the mean, so they were a little lucky in that standpoint. I would not be surprised at all if they went closer to like 5-7. I think that is an acceptable step back. If they fall all the way back to 3 or 2 wins, I wouldn't expect that. But if they do, I think that would probably be Sean Lewis moving into prove-it territory going into 2021, but I think the job itself is still safe for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think 5 wins is acceptable. I agree with you. I guess it just kind of depends the same way how 7-6 looks when you're on a 4-game winning streak, how 5-7 might look if you're on a 4-game losing streak instead of a winning streak.
And then the way their season shakes out, I think they've their last month they've got with Bowling Green and Miami on there, so I wouldn't expect them to kind of tailspin unless they have just some massive pile of injuries that you could attribute things to. I think their schedule spreads out nicely. So I wouldn't anticipate them being a 3 or 4 win team and or a team that ends on this horrid streak, but they're a heavy candidate for at least a small step back.
Yeah, and your out of conference isn't doing you any favors. At Penn State, home against Kennesaw State, at Kentucky, at Alabama.
Hey, y'all sleeping on Kent State at Kentucky. Wait. Oh, that Kentucky. My bad.
I'm going to throw out, just because I've got a serious theme here, and it's directional Michigan. Give me the Western Michigan Central Michigan game on October 17th for a couple reasons. One, it's just fun when you get directional. Well, it's actually at Ford Field, so it'll be nice and empty inside of Ford Field for everybody to. That'll be great for everybody. Second of all, Western Michigan, obviously they've got a lot of turnover, but I'm still pretty high on them just because I like Tim Lester. They're out of conference.
Joke's on you, buddy. Nobody goes to the MAC for the ambiance.
Well, their early season schedule isn't doing them much help either. Like, I don't know what we're going to be able to glean from their games at Cincy, at Notre Dame, and then home against Syracuse. That's probably their
pretty interesting.
Well, there you go. But are they going to have stuff figured out? It's early in the season. Once you're getting into mid-season,
what does the Syracuse guy think? Are they going to be able to have a chance against Syracuse? Or are they going to go 1-3 out of conference?
I think that if they have a chance to win one of those 3 out of conference games against bigger competition, I think it's the Syracuse game. But that has a lot to do with the fact that they're at home, and we'll see what that means.
And that Kyle's a pessimist.
And then I'm an eternal pessimist. Don't want to get into a diatribe about Syracuse right now, but then you get into the conference schedule, and that's a pretty good barometer of how far ahead you are as a team that had so much turnover. If Western Michigan can hang with Central Michigan or beat them, I think they're right there with them for the rest of the year.
The last game I want to mention, I'm not actually excited about it at all, but on Saturday, September 5th, Akron is opening up the season hosting Youngstown State. And on the day that game is played, it will have been 679 days since Akron has won a football game.
Oh, Jesus.
So that game's going to mean a ton to Akron, I imagine.
What
Tom
day is
Arth
that?
That is Saturday, September 5th.
All right, so that same day, Central Michigan will be playing San Jose State, and Charlie Fry will be dying on the sideline.
So here's a related hot take for you guys. As regards to Akron, I'm going to put myself on the record right now. Their next win is going to be September 18th of 2021 against FCS. Man,
a whole nother year. Wow.
You don't think that? Oh man, that's that hurts. You don't think they have a chance against UMass?
So here's the problem. So we already know for a fact that we can just forget about the Clemson game because logic. And Akron was the worst team in the country comfortably last season. So they're sort of in the boat that UTEP was in a year or two ago, where they need to improve a decent chunk just to be closer to not last place, let alone improvement. So I really think that rules out any wins in conference play. I think that their best bet is at home against UMass, but I also don't think it's a great bet. So I'm being only a little bit daring, saying that they won't beat UMass or Youngstown State, but not very much daring. So I think it's going to be that long.
So instead of maybe this season, instead of Zippy being a kangaroo, it can just be a popped balloon and just deflating and shooting left and right. It's probably more.
I was thinking more like an unzipped pair of pants.
They just let it out there for everybody to take advantage of them.
An unzipped pair of Frank Solich's pants.
Are we ready? Are we ready to make predictions on our East, West, and MAC champions?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right,
Let's do it.
Nick, I will have you lead.
Oh, snap. All right, so, Leah, let's get the correct prediction out first.
Yes. Yes.
I think East is going to be Ohio. West is going to be CMU. And I think CMU's going to get...
CMU is the MAC champion, as per Nick. Jeff, what do you got?
So, the East is going to be the Red Hawks, again, Miami of Ohio. In the West, we're going to have a surprise return to the top with Toledo, but they're still going to fall to Miami in the conference championship.
I think that Buffalo is going to win the East, and I believe that in the West, your Ball State Cardinals are going to surprise. And it's not, it maybe not because they just outright win it as much as it taking Central and Western losing it. But I'm going to predict Ball State to win the West, but Buffalo to win the MAC and be the MAC champion at the end of the year.
All right.
This will be the year.
Already wrote down.
My votes right here that are not based on anything factual are going to be Miami of Ohio taking the East. And, I mean, it's in their name. The West is going to be won by Western Michigan. I have already said this. I don't know how much more plain I can be.
How much of a fan has he emphasized that he is of Tim Lester?
But sadly, Miami of Ohio wins the MAC championship.
Oh, what a betrayal.
I'm sorry.
What an
I'm sorry, Lester.
His love of Tim Lester has limits.
It got shut down by the state of Ohio.
He took Tim Lester all the way to the altar, and then whoop.
He would do anything for love, but he won't award Western Michigan a MAC championship. He won't do that.
I won't.
On to the Sun Belt.
Oh,
This is one of my favorite conferences, I think. And in a weird way, because I don't support really any of these teams, but I do enjoy watching almost every one of these teams play, except for Texas State. Some of the new staff highlights. We had Elia Drinkwitz. It's because they were Southwest Texas State when I was growing up, and they were bad then. And that campus is not great. So Sean Clark takes over at Appalachian State.
For 1 year because that seems to be the thing that happens there.
no, he'll be
I'm going to immediately go to Jeff here because his wife, former App State alum, and he goes to a lot of those games. Do you think that Sean Clark can keep the air quotes culture of App State rolling?
I do. He played there and has coached there for a while, so he's been a part of the culture. They'll keep the scheme on both sides, which has worked really well. And I think they'll take a step back on defense. They were really, really good on defense last year. They had a couple good guys go to the NFL, but they'll still be pretty good on offense. And I don't know if they'll be 13-1 again, but I think they'll be top 25 quality towards the end of the year again.
Do you think part of that's going to be because they're beating up on the Sun Belt, or that? I'm not sure what their schedule looks like.
They're interesting. They start off with Morgan State, but then they go at Wake Forest and at Wisconsin. So things might get brutal, to start. But then they have the aforementioned UMass coming before Louisiana Lafayette comes. So they could start off 2-3. I could see that happening, which would really put a dent. And then they go at Georgia Southern the week after that. So their first half of the season is going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, just from looking at it, I imagine 10 wins is probably the floor I'd give them just for how they keep churning things out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Sean Clark's a good coach, too.
I think they're in a situation where Clark will, of course, keeps going in large part because he doesn't have to really do much to do that. Scott Satterfield did a really good job of reaffirming and growing that culture. It's proof in the pudding that Drinkwitz got the job he did after 1 year of doing nothing, that the culture is what it is. I could be talked into App State going 13-1, but I think that they're going to lose. They're losing a good bit on defense. I think that they'll probably still be the best defense in the conference just because they were so much better than everyone last season and they have room to kind of slide a little bit. But I definitely do not see them beating Wisconsin. Struggle, maybe beat Wake Forest, and they'll probably lose one. So I would say comfortably 10 wins. They may flirt with 11. They may flirt with, but I'd be hard pressed to see them finish season ranked in the top 25 again.
Since I buried Texas State, I do want to make it up a little bit. So I don't hate Jake Spav at all, really that much. And he's now taking over the play calling duties after letting Bob Stitt go. He is a Holgerson, Sumlin, Sonny Dykes product. So I expect that Texas State is still going to be pretty bad. But they're going to have a system. Go ahead.
That's the problem with Texas State is that Spav's going to take over, and so this is going to be like their 17th defensive system in the last 4 years. And as we all know, so recruiting in San Marcos is the butt to begin with. You're in Texas, you're in the middle of it, but you're still getting there are times where Texas State is losing recruits to Incarnate Word. That's the kind of situation they're in that Spav is trying to fix. But every time you change coaches, you're at least to a slightly different extent recruiting to a new system. And so what Spav can do and sort of how that system he can really put in place with the talent he got, I'd be hard-pressed to see a significant amount of improvement this year. That might come next year, but realistically, he could win 5 games and people will be licking his boots. So, the floor is low, and I feel like this is a year for Texas State where you're going to see a whole bunch of improvement, but it'll probably come in the form of a lot of really close losses.
Yeah, I think you're probably going to have just as many 20-plus yard touchdowns that you're going to have pick sixes. It's going to be very volatile.
But hey, if you're going to be bad, be excitingly bad, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. See Syracuse. So, are there any? Kyle, do you have anything
exciting?
Well, yeah, last year was not very exciting. Not really any other head coaching hires. Is there anybody like Chip Lindsey, Chad Lunsford, Billy Napier that you guys want to focus in on at all?
One thing that I'll mention that I think does not get enough credit so far, not that there's a ton of credit to give, is Steve Campbell over in South Alabama. I want to say he's reason number one, but he's a big part of the reason that they're going to be opening the season in a brand new stadium, Hancock Whitney Stadium. He was kind of one of the voices that helped kind of finish that off. This was a program that was not going to get a stadium whilst continuing to go 5-7 under Joey Jones. And so that new blood and sort of the energy and vid that he brought was one of the last things that was allowed that to sort of get the momentum it needed. So I think that he deserves a lot of credit for that. And he hasn't been able to have a lot of success on the field just yet, but he didn't inherit a particularly deep roster. And while he's not returning a ton of production this season, it's kind of, national average level of returning production. It's probably the highest level of production he's had coming back just yet. So this is probably the most year-to-year stability he's had. If they were in the East, that's stacked with App State, Georgia Southern, and Troy, that probably would mean a lot less. But in a little more free-for-all in the Sun Belt West, they could probably do a little bit more. But I'm a little bit disappointed that we've gotten this far, and you guys have not said a word about the most important of development in the Sun Belt this offseason, which is that craptastic new logo.
You don't like the new logo?
That new logo looks like my 8-year-old nephew drew it for my bank.
Yeah, it does. It does look like a bank logo. Absolutely. No, it is a downgrade. I don't think it's an awful logo, but it does very much look like your regional credit union.
Now, I will say that we attempted to have a logo redesign contest on Instagram. We got 9 entries, and every one of those entries also looked like a bank logo, so maybe we should be too.
Maybe it's the letters, just the SBC. If you're going to have to incorporate it, just by its nature, very nature, looks like a bank logo.
And you also have to look at it and be like Sun Belt, Sun Trust. It's immediately right there.
I'm glad we all laid out on his joke. So players spotlight. Players
Whatever.
to watch for. I'm sorry. Player spotlight. What to watch for. Nick, you are the most knowledgeable probably of all of us here. So if you want to start by naming a few players,
Yes,
I'm going to pepper.
So one of the ones I'm most interested in is Logan Bonner over at Arkansas State.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've had a very recent history of a lot of success at the quarterback position. And Logan Bonner wasn't available for most of the season, but the part of the season that he was available for, got your Red Bulls fans drooling. So, assuming he's able to stay healthy for a full season, I am really curious to see if he can continue growing, because I think that he's the type of athlete and the type of quarterback that when Arkansas State's system can really flourish, and if he can put in 3 or 4 years in that system, he can really challenge guys like Freddie Knighton and Justice Hansen for best quarterback in the program's history. So I'm curious to see if this can be year one of that trajectory, or if it's just going to be another injury-filled year, or maybe he's a little closer to his ceiling than we thought he was. The other one is, so if I'm interested and intrigued by the presence of Logan Bonner, I'm equally intrigued by the absence of Zach Thomas. Largely because we know that part of the reason that App State's been able to have the success they had was because of the stability of his presence. So, just sort of that flip side now. Okay, how much do we need to tweak or water down the system now that we're hitting the reset button on the captain of the offense? Or will Darrington Evans and guys like that be able to carry the load enough that the quarterback can kind of sit back and let things happen and sort of run smoothly? And then there's the quarterback who's not a quarterback, of course. Shai Wertz, who is definitely going to have a good year or horrible year or both. No one ever knows. This is Georgia Southern. There's a lot of, I think, of any other group of conferences, this is probably the one that will be unique and interesting under center. So the Sun Belt has that going for it. But yeah, that's kind of where my attention is coming into the season.
Do you think that Logan Bonner is going to beat out Lane Hatcher?
I do, yeah. I mean, he showed a lot of great promise last season. He would be the starter right now had he not ended the season injured. I would like to think that same promise and progress is going to show up going into this season. Maybe I'm just an overly optimist Logan Bonner stan. Not talk about that. But yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, Bonner was excellent. They almost beat SMU week 1 last year, and his injury, Arkansas State was still a really, really good team last year, but it played a huge part in why they didn't have more than 8 wins, I thought.
I was going to say we should backtrack a little. There is one coaching ad that we didn't touch on, but it's partly because it's so recent, which is Sean Elliott's new assistant coach at Georgia State, which is Dan Ellington.
Oh, I don't even have that on here.
It's a nice little bit of synergy. He graduated. He's come right back in as assistant coach, which on paper will smooth the transition away from Ellington at quarterback. I'm curious to see what role he'll exactly have. Right now, he's just listed as generic assistant coach, but I would be shocked if he was doing something other than like quarterback's coach or something like that. But that's an interesting little detail. How much that'll mean big picture, I don't know, but I definitely like the idea of Dan Ellington beginning his trajectory to head coach at Georgia State.
Yeah, just stepping right back into the school that he contributed so much to.
Tennessee.
Kyle's also a Tennessee graduate, so this is just wonderful.
Went to school.
That was a delightful amount of that game didn't happen.
I think that
I watched it. It was
fun. Everybody on Twitter dunking on Tennessee at the same time is always.
I was just shaking my head and dunking on them myself.
See, I think that Georgia State gets slept on because the upset over Tennessee was only the second most interesting game of their season. The most interesting game was the following week when they barely beat Furman.
Yeah, it is.
But I guess that's what Tennessee does to people.
When you're coming off that high.
Yeah, I think I saw someone attribute it to the body blow from Tennessee caused them to almost lose to Furman. But of that Tennessee-Georgia State game, it didn't look like there was a whole lot of body blows. They were running pretty free against Tennessee almost the entire game.
Yeah, they're the volunteers. They did not volunteer to tackle.
No, they didn't.
Volunteered to sit this one out. Coastal Carolina is a team I kind of wanted to speak about a little bit. Taron Jackson, their defensive lineman, I think he's probably an NFL draft prospect, is going to be really pivotal to their defense. Their offense, they're bringing back their running back, almost their entire offensive line, their top 3 receiving targets. After 2 5-7 seasons, I think maybe this is the year that Coastal Carolina can go bowling. I'd like your thoughts on that, Nick, if you would.
It would be nice, wouldn't it? Especially since now they have a bowl game right in their backyard. I think Coastal's in this interesting situation where you always worry having a lot of guys come back is almost always a good thing. The only time that's not a good thing is when you were so bad that it doesn't really matter how much of that production comes back. I think in their case, they were good enough that that's going to work in their favor. And they were awfully lucky to go 5-7 last season. I think that's a team that probably deserved to go something more like 3-9. I think that this year they're finally going to become a talent 5 or 6 win team. Whether they get there, we'll see. But I really would like to see a situation where you get to see Coastal Carolina fans just pissing and moaning because they made a bowl game, but it's at home.
Yeah, they beat Kansas at Kansas, which was the biggest, and then they also beat Troy 36-35. And just looking at the 2019 results towards the end here, so the last 5 games, they win 36-35 over Troy. They get absolutely destroyed by Louisiana 48-7. They lose a close one to Arkansas State 28-27. They lose a close one to Louisiana Monroe 45-42. And then they beat Texas State 24-21. So they kind of seem like they're living on the margins. And
then you'll also know that those close losses were also on the road, too.
Yeah, the Arkansas State and Louisiana Monroe.
They went 0-3 in one-possession road games. Sorry, 1-3 at Kansas.
Yeah, sorry, Les Miles. I don't know. I'd like to see Coastal Carolina. They've always kind of been on the periphery for me, that I've always kind of looked at their games to see the results because, frankly, I love the Chanticleers nickname. I love their colors. I love that it's CCU. I don't know. It's just like I've always dug.
You love Myrtle Beach?
Do not love.
Sir, it's Chanticleers.
Is it Chanticleers?
To put on my best. I don't know if there's a Myrtle Beach bro accent on that. I hate to.
It is. The accent, the Myrtle Beach accent is just drunk slurs. That's it.
but in that sense, let's talk about the thing that's going to annoy the crap out of the most adult fans this season, which is that despite their likely regression, this year is probably going to be another repeat of Louisiana against App State. So you're going to hear just nonstop, oh no, not this again.
Yep.
I think this year is the closest that we'll come to that not happening, but it's going to happen.
Yeah, I think I'm probably jumping into my picks here, but I agree with you. I was at that championship game last year, and App pretty much dominated it and really let Louisiana in back kind of at the end of the fourth quarter. I think the difference this year, they'll be comparable on offense again, but Louisiana's going to be able to overcome App's losses on defense. So, but I agree with you. You're going to hear about this right up until the season starts.
Yeah, and we can segue right into some of those games. One of the things I wanted to point out was the October 7th matchup between Louisiana and Appalachian State. In 2019, that game was at Louisiana, and they lost 17-7. So they kept it close, and then like you spoke of the actual conference game, it was kind of a story of two halves, but App State was well within the driver's seat most of it. I'd be interested to see what this first conference matchup looks like, and if it's going to tell us more when they do probably very likely end up meeting up in the title game.
Yeah, so truth be told, that game is a bit of a tricky one because I was actually at that regular season App State Louisiana game, and while that final score was 17-7, there was only about 15 minutes, and you can guess which 15, where Louisiana was actually ever in any real threat of winning that game. So the result was a bit suppressed. I'm honestly going to go a little bit later in the season. I'm curious to see how the Cajuns do finishing their season with a pair of road games, especially with all of a sudden, I don't know, we're a November 21st game at Missouri. I think that if the guys they have coming back are able to gain a little steam and kind of get on a roll, you may well see them flirt with danger there at whatchamacallit, Tiger Field or whatever it is in Columbia.
I see Ferret Field, but I don't know if that's right. FAUROT.
Fart Field?
Fart Field.
But there may be a chance that they could pull that one out. You know, equal likely chance that no matter how much momentum they have, they'll be looking ahead to the ULM game. But I'm really curious to see if they can do some damage in Columbia. That's
actually a really fascinating one. I must have just missed it when I was looking over everyone's schedule because you also kind of have that tie-in too where Drinkwitz maybe maybe knows how to beat Louisiana, or does he sleep on them because that App State cruise control of and stability for that program, if maybe he comes into it and doesn't appreciate what Louisiana has to offer and ends up getting snake bit.
Doesn't appreciate what Louisiana has to offer, much like, the entire state of Louisiana. Fun fact, you guys, if you ever wind up coming down, I can say this, I live down in Sunbelt country. If you ever wind up in the area, you will be delighted to know that Jake Delhomme, famous Raging Cajuns alum, is just kind of there. If you ever go to a game, he will be there and he will be around. So you'll have your opportunity.
Well, they've forgotten about him here in Charlotte.
No, they haven't. He was kind of there too when he was the quarterback for the Panthers. There's a playoff game that I know a lot of Panthers fans they know very well who Jake Delhomme is.
Yeah, he's a cult hero here.
Is that what it is?
Jeff, does Logan Bonner and or Lane Hatcher worry you when Arkansas State goes to Michigan September 19th?
No. I expect Michigan played Middle Tennessee State last year, and they gave Michigan some fits because they were just chucking the ball all over the place. And Marty, you remember SMU did it a couple years ago too. So I expect they'll score some points, but I think Michigan will run them over. So I'm not too worried about it. I was actually
Michigan doesn't have a history or anything of losing to teams they probably shouldn't.
Well, it's going to be interesting, and that's for a separate discussion. But
especially Sunbelt teams that are existing in the Sunbelt right now.
Yeah, right. Just one was 20 minutes talking about.
Is that part of like the wedding deal, Jeff? Was that you were like, okay, I'm going to have to now marry somebody from App State since they beat Michigan?
I did, and then the first App game I went to was actually the game they celebrated the anniversary of beating Michigan. It was the whole theme of the game, and my wife was just cracking up the whole time.
It's so wonderful.
Welcome to the family.
Hey, wait a minute. Here's my question. Since we're so sure that they're going to make it to the title game, shouldn't we be more worried about Michigan playing Ball State?
That's a good point. That's a death row, really, their schedule. With Arkansas State and Ball State.
They're on a conference schedule is now number 1 in the country.
Yeah, it is. They have I think 119th returning production on offense and 110th on defense. So they're going to have to really break in some new shoes against some tough competition. Let's predict the Sun Belt Championship, fellas.
Sure.
I think 3 of us already said App State, Louisiana, right?
I'm going to go, and this is also going to tie into a game that I'm looking forward to, and that's my preview of the Sun Belt Championship. That's October 24th when App State plays Arkansas State.
Oh,
I'm going to go Arkansas State. They've got more people returning. Louisiana doesn't have as many people returning. Maybe that experience helps Arkansas State out, and they might just edge them out.
You just want to see them wear those ridiculous silver blackout wolf helmets.
Those
sure.
Really cool helmets.
Garrett Wolf helmets.
Full circle here.
Yes. Helmets with a decal of Garrett Wolf's face instead of an actual wolf.
So we have 4 of us choosing App State as the East winner, 3 choosing Louisiana in the West, and 1 choosing Arkansas State, correct?
Yes, the one that's obviously the best at betting too out of all of us.
Yeah, he finished last, Nick, in our pick'em last year.
It got to a point where I was just picking against Jeff.
And then you came back on that.
Yeah, I did come back on that.
All rigged. I don't believe in that stuff.
Who do we think the champion is going to be?
You know what? Let's go out on a limb. Louisiana pulls it off.
Hey,
because
I've got Louisiana too. Yes, sir.
I think that in this situation, so it's hard to pick against Louisiana App State just because they were so far ahead of the rest of the conference last year and they return as much as they do. I think that Louisiana definitely gets a run for their money from Arkansas State, but obviously they get the benefit of having them at home, so I think that tilts it just enough in their favor. And I feel like it seems as though between the loss of Zach Thomas and the defensive losses, that's going to give just enough opportunity for Louisiana to pull it out. I think that it'll be a nail biter, and it probably will be one of those games that Louisiana will win closer than they probably should, but That's going to be the call, Louisiana.
Yeah, I'm with you. I got to catch Levi Lewis a couple times on TV last year, and I think he's a really good player for Louisiana. I think he can be even better, especially against App. So I'm with you. I think Louisiana finally turns the tide and takes the ship this year.
So three of us
Traitor.
are Louisiana.
I know. My wife's going to come stab me.
You know what? I'm going to do this out of respect for your wife. I'm going to pick App State.
Wow.
Jeez.
Oh God! Don't tell her this, Jeff. Don't please.
See,
I hope she doesn't.
that's spoken like a man who has watched Levi Lewis play quarterback more than 2 times. He has his ups, but ooh boy, he's. Oh God, how can I word this? If anyone knows of an NFL quarterback whose name rhymes with Seamus, Levi Lewis is a bit like that.
Yeah, that's a fair comp. Except he's 6 inches shorter.
I know a professional wrestler.
It sounds like somebody that
Seamus.
It sounds like this quarterback just likes to eat W's then. So
He's maybe always hungry.
It's a rough life as a Saints fan, you guys. I have yet to reconcile this situation, so let's just move past it.
Excellent. So we have our Sun Belt picked. Let's move past it and let's go into Conference USA to finish out the show.
wait, I need to make one comment because he's going to be the backup quarterback there. So do you think he's going to be holding the clipboard real close to his face because he can't see anything?
Oh, he got LASIK.
Oh yeah, he did get LASIK.
Did he really get LASIK?
So he's going to be holding it twice as far away.
He's going to be doing.
He's going to be holding a selfie stick.
The better is, do you think he's going to hold the clipboard with his fingers crossed, like making the W behind it, like he's holding the board up?
I hope so.
But no, he's going to have a hard time using using gold highlighter instead of red. Yes, let's talk about Kusa.
Yeah, so the Conference USA,
Kusa
time, baby. They had the most head coach movement. We have new head coaches Willie Taggart, Ricky Ronnie, and Jeff Traylor. Let's start with Willie Taggart since we have exhausted that man's name since last season when he was fired.
Yeah, I really want you guys' opinion. How do you guys feel about Willie in Paradise? Willie Taggart or just any other Willie in any Paradise?
Willie Beeman. So I think Willie Taggart, I like the hire by Florida Atlantic. I think it's ideal in someone to follow Lane. I think that he's got a lot to prove, and I think that Florida Atlantic, realistically, we have now seen is probably the right level of program for him to be at.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the fit. I don't know what it looks like in year one because Florida Atlantic was a pretty great team last year, and they lost a pretty good amount of production. So I like the hire. It's a shame because I think they're going to take a step back and it's going to end up falling on Willie again.
I think that Willie's not going to... I think that Willie's going to be there for 3 or 4 years, and to the untrained eye, this hire is going to look worse when he leaves than when he arrived. The problem for Willie is that he's very good as a program builder. He drug Western Kentucky out of the dirt. He's a lot less good as a guy who is sort of sustaining or building. He'll get that a little bit this year because he's sort of, having to do a great job of recruiting and replace the talent that Lane lost. So between the quality of guys that are left over from Lane and the quality of guys he's going to bring in, he's going to have too much talent to not at least trip into 8 wins. So the floor is fairly high, but I think it's going to be hard for him to sort of sustain that. And I also think that Lane raised the floor so much that, you're going to start having fans who are disappointed with 9 or 10 win seasons. Dare I say it, he may be Conference USA's next Frank Solich.
Oh, no. But the humidity down in Florida, he's going to have shorts. It cannot be pants.
Can't be old pants.
How about Jorts?
Oh, you know what? You are in Florida. Jorts would be totally accepted. I always had coming from last year, we talked about it quite a bit. Willie Taggart got kind of a raw deal down at Florida State. He goes in, he's got 2 years. Yeah, he wasn't great, but he was getting, the second that they lost a game, they were, the board was already getting pissed off about it, and it would really suck for him to now go to a coaching situation where now you've got fans that are now entitled, and now they're going to start if they start making the same noise if he's like not instantly successful, or if he doesn't get
the same state, so it's fans.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe he just needs to get out of Florida.
Yeah, and I wonder how much that is actually the Florida Atlantic fans' problem, or is it because you've seen in the last 10 years South Florida surge, UCF surge, even though USF's come back down since then, but Florida Atlantic and Florida International to an extent too have really not. No, I guess Florida Atlantic has. They've hit a pretty great and a pretty high ceiling. So to feel like you're one of the G5 Florida powers, if there is such a thing, and hope that you don't fall back down to how we know how bad Florida Atlantic can be. Like, I understand that from a fan perspective. It worries me that Sonny Dykes leaves and SMU goes back to being just dog shit again. Like, it worries me. I think Willie...
And that's one of the challenges of Florida football now, is that the floor has come up so much now that FIU is the worst D1 team in the state, and they're pretty consistently a borderline bowl eligible team at this point. So the overall talent in Florida has finally stayed home enough that, at FAU, if you slip to even 7 wins, like, the shine is already off.
Yep. And looking at programs that he's taken over, you mentioned Western Kentucky. His first season, he had 2 wins. When he took over South Florida in 2013, 2 wins. And then he had 7 wins his first year at Oregon, 5 wins his first year at Florida State. 3 of those 4 are worse situations in terms of where the program was the year prior. That Florida Atlantic's a better position for him, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. Oregon being the other one that was better.
I think that I'd be shocked. They're guaranteed to backslide just because of the amount of talent they're losing. I would be shocked if they backslid further than 8 wins. I'd probably peg them for 9, but they're going to have to scratch and claw to even win the division this year. So it's going to be a much more, comparatively speaking, tooth and nail season this year.
And installing a new defense without spring practice is not going to help that either, with Jim Leavitt coming in. Do we have any thoughts on Ricky Ronnie?
He's an interesting hire. The hire of Ricky Ronnie makes me wonder exactly how everyone at Old Dominion felt about Bobby Wilder, because when they were winning, everybody loved him. Now, granted, we're kind of ignoring the fart in the wind that was Old Dominion football back in the 1940s, but he is the only coach Old Dominion's ever had. But I thought he was great guy. They loved him, but as soon as things started to slip, they turned on him. I'm wondering kind of how exposed the underbelly really was, that they're hitting such a hard reset with Ronnie and a guy who's no experience with the area, no connection to the area, that kind of thing. He's a big name, but he's got no real connection, and we've kind of see that go both ways, especially for a lot of Group of 5 schools. So as a guy who is a Penn State fan, I want him to succeed. I don't think it's going to happen right away, but I'm also curious to see just how much he struggles with the small amount of ties he has to the area.
Especially when Shane Beamer was rumored to be in consideration for that job. I think you kind of hit on it on maybe where Old Dominion thinks they need to be, because there's no doubt Beamer would have been a slower, more program building turnaround. Potentially, we're taking his father's reputation and instilling it on him already, which that might be wrong to do.
Does he have his father's neck?
He can't help that, man.
I'm wondering, Old Dominion's one of those teams. They're kind of in that situation of they were bad enough last year that the massive amount of production they have coming back is not as relevant. Now, I say that in terms of on-field product, because they were so bad last year, that amount of production isn't going to mean a whole lot. But what it does mean is that Ronnie can kind of dial it back a little bit in terms of how successful and how quickly he needs to be on the recruiting trail. So especially in his case, where he's that kind of guy. He knows Happy Valley, he knows the Big Ten, that sort of developing the relationships with the high school coaches in the area and that sort of thing, make sure that talent stays home. that's something that'll succeed for him. Slightly less so because obviously he doesn't have that name recognition region that Beamer does. But I think that it'll be interesting to see how that balance plays out between him wanting to bring in his guys and install his system, but having to do so a bit slower just because of the amount of returning talent he inherited.
Yeah, you mentioned returning talent, and just kind of as an example of not all returning talent is good. Their leading passer, their top 3 leading passers are all returning, but their leading passer, Stone Smart.
Great name.
It's a fantastic name, which makes this stat line unfortunate. He was 101 for 177 attempts, which is good for a 57% pass percentage, 1,000 yards passing. I'm rounding down a couple. 1 touchdown and 6 interceptions. Their leading quarterback in touchdowns was Hayden Wolf, who threw for 2. And there's no one that left that I'm mentioning here. They had as quarterbacks, as a quarterback room, they had a combined 5 passing touchdowns. So not all returning production is good, but Ricky Ronnie, being such an offensive-minded coach, probably makes one of them. He has to make them better. It's not going to be
He's got to at
hard.
least eke 7 total touchdowns out of them.
Yeah, there's got to be 8 laying in there.
To sort of drift from one topic to another, one interesting thing about Old Dominion is that Stone Smart is the leading guy, but the guy who finished 4th on the depth chart last season is the guy who was the starter in 2017 as a not even yet 18-year-old freshman. So even Williams, no one's talking about him. He is a redshirt junior who's not even 21 years old yet, but who already has a season plus of experience at center. So I'm curious to see if maybe he can kind of get back under Ronnie's system, or maybe he's just like old news under the rug at this point. But it's an interesting little detail to keep an eye on with Old Dominion.
Yeah, and as a freshman, he threw for 6 touchdowns, beating out the entire quarterback room last year by 1. Do we want to talk about Jeff Traylor? Because I have a small note about him, and that's pretty much it.
Never heard of him.
Give us your small note.
So Jeff Traylor took over at UT San Antonio, and he is an assistant that was tagging along with Chad Morris. Deep Texas high school coaching roots, which is an obvious move. It's the same reason SMU brought in Chad Morris, but I don't see...
R.I.P. Chad Morris.
I see him just being another Todd Dodge at North Texas, is the way I view it. I think UT...
I can't believe you said that name out loud.
Yeah, it's I used to. Jeff and Kyle currently work for someone who actually played for Todd Dodge at South Lake Carroll.
Oh, yes.
Very familiar with the Dodge family.
These people you work for that play for Todd Dodge, do they have severe PTSD from playing bad football?
I'm not going to ask.
One of them is one of their bosses. So yeah, here let's go to the player spotlight. If we don't have anything else, actually, you know what? One thing I want to ask Nick: how much longer of a leash is Dana Dimel going to get at UTEP? Do you think?
So let me ask you guys: if you're a construction foreman and your project is really nothing more than to go to the side of the road and dig a series of connected ditches, how much leeway are you going to give a dude when his ditches are all leading away from each other initially? Right? So you're kind of dealing with different flavors of doo-doo here. I think that... So I'm not a huge Dana Dimel fan because I think it was a really vanilla, safe hire at a time when UTEP needed to do something different to kind of... Because Sean Kugler just dug them into such a massive hole because he was such a twiddle.
Twiddle!
I feel like he has finally made enough progress that he has taken UTEP from clearly uncomfortably the worst program in the country to just one of the worst in the country. But I'm a little worried exactly how hard he's going to trying to turn UTEP into K-State, because that's kind of the biggest success and bell cow that he has to lean on experience-wise, which isn't a bad thing for UTEP. I think, because even mediocrity would be a huge win for them. I just wonder that in a conference like Conference USA, where not a lot of teams play that kind of stagnant defense-first ball, whether or not that's the kind of plan that can really make a difference. And he's not even at a point yet where he has recruited enough talent to run that kind of system, and I'm hard pressed to believe that you're going to find enough players that want to play that kind of ball and want to be stuck in El Paso for 4 years to really achieve it. So I would say that he has to get to at least 3 wins by next season, or it's going to be done.
Yeah, I was pretty high on the hire, not because I liked him, but I thought it'd be pretty neat to have a Kansas State-esque program that UTEP could kind of build around, and it just hasn't bared fruit yet.
All we need is to get on national TV long enough for us to catch a couple doing dirty deeds on the hills one more time. Do you guys know that story?
About what? No, feel free.
So it was back in the 90s. There was I don't remember if it was a home game for UTEP or if it was the actual Sun Bowl itself, but they come back from commercial break and they cut to this couple that's like on the mountainside up above the stadium. There's a view of the stadium, and right before they cut back to the game, you can clearly see that her hand is down his pants.
Oh, that's great.
Just getting in that mining spirit.
Finding.
Trying to find the pickaxe. So what players are you guys keeping an eye out for, or do you think maybe some of our listeners don't know and they need to keep an eye out for?
I'm going to go last here because I'm extremely biased on this one.
Okay, let's start with you, Kyle.
Let's go Chris Robinson. I want to say Robinson. And Florida Atlantic's quarterback. I mean, there's going to be a lot that gets put on his back with new regime coming in. I think that setting your eyes to him will be pretty advantageous, because if they're gonna win, a lot's gonna have to go through him.
Yeah, and his is a challenging one because he consistently to this point, he probably was made starter a little before he was ready, but I think that hopefully this year is the year because he has consistently underperformed so far. If Willie does what I think he's going to do, Robison's going to be in the system that is most beneficial to him. I just don't know if this is going to be the year that it clicks because of that, or the year we finally go, well, okay, nothing's going to work for this kid.
Yeah, maybe he's just hit his ceiling. One of the players I have is a nose tackle for North Texas named Dion Novel. He is NFL draft quality player. I've used that phrase already, but I'm not going to use it again. He is excellent on the defensive line, and he's going to need to be because they're losing some pieces around him. Big body in the middle. And I'll add another one on here to keep it rolling. Rice is returning the most defensive production this year of anybody in the country. And they have a 4-2-5 that they run, or that they like to run. And I believe they're only going to have maybe entirely juniors or seniors on their defense, but there's a chance that a freshman comes into that second safety spot. And that freshman is Gabe Taylor, brother, not son, younger brother of former NFL safety Sean Taylor.
Ooh.
And he is a 3-star out of Florida. He was really good. He had 9 interceptions his senior year, so he's kind of a ball hawk. He's the guy I kind of want to keep an eye on because you'll definitely hear about him with his ties to his brother, but I think he has the goods to also back it up.
Oh, wait, is he his son or his brother? I'm confused.
He's both.
It's his brother's son.
Oh, he's a big dude too, my God.
Yeah, a shocker, right? Someone related to Sean Taylor is a huge safety. Yeah, he was excellent in high school. I'm excited to see what he could do at Rice. And it's just kind of cool that Rice got him. Really odd, just from a level of recruiting.
And also like a weird regional standpoint too.
Yeah, from going to Florida to Houston. Well, the humidity.
He didn't want to go play for Willie Taggart.
He's not a fan of William Paradise.
Jeff, do you have anybody that stands out to you?
Yeah, one guy I'm kind of interested in watching, and I think we talked about him before a couple times. Local guy, Chris Reynolds from Charlotte. Definitely played better last year at quarterback. I think still has a ways to go. You know, they lost their running back and a couple good players on defense. So, you know, it's going to be more of his team this year. I think we were all pretty pleased with Will Healy's job he did last year, and can they continue the momentum this year? They got a tough schedule though, so it's going to be interesting to watch Reynolds lead this team.
Okay. And Nick, I'm going to throw it to you after I mention two more. Hopefully I don't steal yours, okay? I'll keep it
Guarantee
short.
you won't. Don't.
Now I'm going to start digging through depth charts. So I want to bring up both of these quarterbacks and a running back for one of the teams, but it's also kind of a prediction of who I think is going to have the best offense in the East and who's going to have the best offense in the West. Jack Abraham, the quarterback for Southern Miss. Extremely excited to see him. I think that Southern Miss has a chance to have the best offense in the West. And then Middle Tennessee quarterback Asher O'Hara and their running back transfer out of West Virginia, Martell Pettaway. I think with how explosive they were last year, what they're bringing back, I think they have a chance to be the best offense in the East and what is going to be a really fun conference overall, and doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be 8, 9, or 10 wins, but they're games that I will tune in because I think both of those teams are going to have really fun offenses.
Are you ready now that you got nowhere close?
Yes.
So I am fascinated. You guys went through all of that and did not say a single word. Sorry, product plug. You guys did not say a single word about the team that is returning the most production on both sides of the ball in the conference. The team that I'm in the midst of writing a book about the history of their football program, the reborn UAB Blazers. Now, there's a lot of guys you could talk about on this team. Last year was a bit of a minor miracle because last year they were somewhere around 98th or 100th in returning production on defense, and they improved from 43rd to 28th in defensive S&P+. This year, they return all but like two backups from that defense. But the most interesting part of that is Bronte Harris. So going into last season, the conversation was, yes, we've got to replace a lot on defense, but it's okay because we've got Bronte Harris and a couple other guys. 2 weeks before the season supposed to start, Harris breaks his foot in practice and misses the entire 2019 season. He is now back, he is now healthy, and is now in charge and leading a defense that is significantly more experienced. So I think that, if nothing else, UAB's defense, despite how well they project this season, is even underrated to a point. I think that it's that type of performances that are going to sort of suppress guys like Jack Abram, but Bronte Harris is for sure the guy that I'm keeping an eye on.
That's a fantastic one. And I through research leading up to this show, I guess it's not a total surprise, but I was fascinated how many good defensive teams there are in this conference between UAB, Western Kentucky. Louisiana Tech wasn't awful. Marshall is certainly good. And I think it was last year they had a game against Boise State, and they've really kept Boise State in check almost the entire time.
Yeah, I think, especially in the last couple of years, Conference USA has sort of all of a sudden turned into a team, a conference of teams that is extremely deep on the defensive ball. And it's sort of turned, okay, which team is going to stay enough on offense to meet their offensive potential? Because if you look at last season, the year before, maybe even 3 years back, pretty consistently, every team that underperformed is a team that had at least one, if not two, substantial performers on their offense go down injured. So you have every year UAB, La Tech, Southern Miss, FAU, Marshall, the entire top half of the conference is in that conversation of, yep, we're good defensively. Who's going to step up offensively? And most of the time, the answer is nobody. But sometimes it's just enough people that they'll be all right.
Do we want to go ahead and shift into the games and our predictions for the East and West winners?
Sure.
Because speaking of that UAB defense, Saturday, September 17th, UAB is visiting the Miami Hurricanes. And we know what Florida International did last year. We know Miami now has D'Eriq King. This really interests me because I think everyone knows UAB is back, right? I've never seen anything that said they hated UAB that wasn't just like a blood rival already. All right, everyone's cheering for them. For them to beat,
they are not Texas. They are definitely back.
For them to beat Miami would be fantastic.
I would love to see it.
Let me sidestep that. I'm going to tweak sentence where if you're talking to a fan of Conference USA football, or especially some Birmingham, a win over Miami is going to be expected.
And is that just a state? Is that more of a state of where UAB's at, do you think, or more of a state where Miami's at? Or a little bit of both?
Yes. Miami looked extremely vulnerable last season. And I don't think, again, we're discussing on paper, of course, but based on what I saw last season and what I know about the changes that have occurred in between, I can definitely say that the Miami team that I saw last year hasn't improved enough to be a clear favorite over the UAB team that's coming back.
I expect Rhett Lashley has some...
Hold on, guys. It's a Thursday night game. That changes everything.
Oh, no. Is it Thursday and I had the wrong date? Well, UAB by 20.
Are you kidding me? They're going to be reeling from that home game against Alabama A&M.
Reeling.
October 3rd, Western Kentucky at Middle Tennessee. Intrigues me from a defense versus offense type game. I think that could be either really ugly or really exciting, whether Western Kentucky can keep up or whether Middle Tennessee can actually break through. That's another game I wanted to keep an eye out for. Jeff or Kyle?
Last game of the season for Florida Atlantic against Middle Tennessee. That should be pretty fun. There should be some scoring.
Yeah, I have two out-of-conference games. I was kind of looking at Western Kentucky, too. They have two of their first four games at Indiana and at Louisville, so going to be interesting to see how they can... It's always fun to watch teams square off against stronger, more traditional teams and kind of how they fare afterwards. So I have Western Kentucky as a dark horse to win their division. Spoiler. We'll see how this goes.
I think that Conference USA this year is really a good case for, I mentioned earlier on about how the interesting thing for Georgia State was not just beating Tennessee, but also how they managed to almost crap the bed the following week against Furman. And I can see situations here where there are a lot of CUSA teams with really robust non-conference games against P5 opponents, and I can see a lot of situations where, like, for instance, Southern Miss, they head to Auburn on September 26th, and the very following week they have to travel to North Texas. On paper, that's a game where I would definitely favor Southern Miss, like all things being equal, but all things won't be equal because Southern Miss is going to be coming off of a road game at Auburn, and North Texas coming off a road game at Houston. That's two very different situations. So I would be curious to see those sort of that's one example of those sort of potential letdown games that can play a big role in sort of how the Conference USA season
gets started. A lot of volatility, but also a lot of room for, the body blow, right? The body blow theory. You play in Auburn.
I believe it's Conference USA. I believe the word you're looking for is Schadenfreude. You never know what might happen.
Nick, who do you have winning the East, and who do you have winning the West?
So, in my, you guys like to call it CUSA universe, hold on.
Let's let this, because before the show, I was setting the table, and I said the CUSA, and I didn't see anybody's face because this is an audio medium, but I could feel the eyeballs burn through me. And please tweet at RememberF5 on Twitter if you've ever heard somebody say CUSA. In short, for Conference USA.
I know that there are so many USA fans that are going to hear that, and every time I say it, they're going to be like, "You fuck!" It's like a trigger word.
Yeah, they just go bloodlusted immediately. Okay, continue. I'm sorry.
This is the CUSA-verse.
It'll come as a real shock to you guys that in the West, I'm picking UAB to repeat as division champs. In the East, I'm actually going to live dangerously. I'm going to say that Western Kentucky pulls it off this season. I think that what little gap there was between Florida Atlantic and the field has closed up. Brock Holiday and Marshall is a guy that his rosters are not necessarily to be trusted in crucial situations. But I think that Western Kentucky will kind of rise to the cream of that crop and face UAB in the title game. I will probably pick UAB to win that game, but based on how evenly matched they are right now in paper and how far away we are from that game, I would call it as a literal 1-point win for UAB at this point.
I went back and forth on it. I think Marshall's schedule is a little more challenging, so I'm also going to go with Western Kentucky taking the East. And I've been convinced now about the greatness that is UAB, despite their kind of dreadful offense. So I'm going to go UAB in the West.
You've heard it, USA fans. I'm in their minds now.
In the East, I have Marshall going through, riding with Doc Holliday. And in the West, and there's a particular game that I also want to mention, Southern Miss is going to go at UAB on November 28th. And I believe that this game will allow Southern Miss to represent the West in the Conference USA Championship game. Jay Hobson, here I come. Draft me, Jay. And my eventual winner, just to turn this all on its head, is going to be Southern Miss 2020 Conference USA champions.
Oh, the funniest part about that is there's a 100% chance that Southern Miss has the potential to do that. That's where I'll stop that statement.
I'm a fan of Matt Kubik too, for what it's worth. I think he can help.
All right, I'm gonna bite down. I'm gonna say Florida Atlantic wins the East, but by a very slim margin.
Yeah, flex that Willie in paradise.
That's right. Just for Willie. He did it for Willie. And then the West, I got to go UAB with the surprise winner of Old Dominion winning the championship on a run-in.
With the Money in the Bank briefcase, Old Dominion comes in, pins UAB.
I want to backtrack a little bit because there's a really, really important game that we didn't talk about that I need to go on a rant about for a minute.
Oh,
okay.
Please do.
Yeah, let's. This is how we're going to end the show. So.
You guys, I'm sure, as fans of college football are familiar with the history of the Marshall football program, the plane crash, the devastation, the movie, the everything, and that this year is the 50th anniversary of that. So November 14th, Saturday, November 14th, the actual 50th anniversary to the day is on a Saturday this year. And the team that Marshall played right after that crash was ECU. Marshall plays at ECU this season, but when are they playing? Out on freaking November 14th? No, they're opening the season on August 29th. Is it really that hard, guys? You had the perfect opportunity and you screwed the pooch.
Yeah, it is a bummer because I saw that they were going to celebrate. Not celebrate. I guess it's probably the wrong word. Honor that event.
Celebrating,
50, yeah,
yes.
not celebrate. That's totally the wrong words. But they're going to do it at that game, and I saw it was at Eastern Carolina. I did like a double take, not really understanding it. And for what it's worth, I think ECU has the goods enough that they might be able to upset them, which is doubly bad. But yes, please, it's on a Saturday. We can't do this. Whoever they have scheduled on the 14th, can we not just move those games? We haven't talked about it
Conference
all.
schedule, bruh.
Who cares whether Marshall and MTSU play on August 29th? Nobody really do it.
Is that a week 0 game then too?
Yep.
Yeah.
No.
Yep.
Well, maybe that was the only way they could get on ESPN, and make a big thing about it.
Know that week 0 is getting go down this year because hey, let's get a waiver to move this game to week 0 instead of doing it on the anniversary.
Well, at least the one good thing we got out of week 0 last year was Steve Spurrier being disgusted with the game in front of him. Nick, do you have any parting comments, Jeff, Kyle, before we wrap up this 3-conference preview episode?
So I think that it was nice to open the thing up with the bottom 65% of the group of 60, whatever. I can't math, whatever. So these conferences are always more fun because the margins are so thin. You know, you're probably 3 turnovers separating you between a 3-9 season and a 9-3 season, which means high drama, high blood pressures, high stress, high donut counts at the vending machines. And it just makes for fun football. So I want to make sure that I take the opportunity to really sell folks on, even if it's just a Tuesday night, there are more reasons to tune into a MAC game than just there's nothing else on TV but reruns. It really is interesting football, good football to watch. So sleep on it, and you really have the opportunity to catch a lot of neat matchups that you wouldn't otherwise see.
I agree with that sentiment. It's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because the group of five truly for me is the most unpredictable for 95%, right? We know that Boise State's going to, you have your powerhouses like App State and stuff, but there's a lot of games and a lot of seasons that can turn on a dime from one player getting hurt. You know what I'm not looking forward to? Our ACC preview. That's going to suck. It's going to be Clemson, right? Like we all know what's going to happen here. We're only going to really talk about one division because only one division actually has a competition going on. So yeah, I'm glad you came on, Nick. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm glad to have joined you guys and educated you and brainwashed you all at once.
That's what I need.
Jeff's a Michigan fan. He's the easiest to brainwash of all of us.
Are you kidding me? I've been waterboarded and tortured more than half the people.
Jeff, Kyle, do y'all have anything else?
If Jeff's ever at a loss, do a step next door and go to Atlantic. Make him really grateful for what he's got.
Probably the biggest takeaway is how excited I'm going to be on August 29th to see them honor Matthew McConaughey for everything he's done for Marshall.
And all right.
For the sacrifices he made. That is a perfect way to end this show. Jeff, Kyle, Nick, please say goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye, universe.
You guys.
If you made it this far, please feel free. Subscribe. Give us 5 stars. It helps out so we can grow this community. Go give Nick and Forgotten 5 a follow.
Yeah, Forgotten5.com. Remember F5 on Twitter.
Thank you all again, Nick, Jeff, Kyle, and we'll be back next week with an American and Mountain West double feature.
Hi, my name is Joshua Tracy.
And I am Corwin Heller.
And we are the hosts of a statistics and sports podcast called Juicing the Numbers.
We cover the NFL, college football, MLB, and the NHL with anything that we like to talk about in between.
If you like sports and the numbers behind it, come check out our show, Juicing the Numbers, on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you find podcasts. Hit us up on Twitter at JuicingPod.